Hey guys, quick question. How long do you think you'd last in 100-degree heat with a pickaxe, a prayer, and yellow fever mosquitoes treating your blood like an all-you-can-eat buffet? A morning? An hour? Try waking up in Panema in 1905. You'll be lucky to make it to your first water break without something microscopic turning your insides into soup. Tonight, we're not talking about engineering marvels, American ingenuity, and heroic canal builders with perfect teeth and unlimited medical coverage. We're talking about the other 99%, the ones who showed up for work and never made it home, the ones whose graveyards outnumbered their paychecks. So before you settle into your climate-controlled bedroom with your mosquito-free air and your complete lack of tropical parasites, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Especially if you're avoiding something important. I get it. Now dim the lights. Maybe put on some white noise, like the gentle hum of your dehumidifier, something that would have been pure magic in 1905 Panama. Because we're about to go back to a time where every shovel of dirt could be your last, every sip of water was a gamble, and death came in more varieties than a disease buffet. Let's get into it. You wake up at 4:30 in the morning to the sound of a steam whistle that cuts through the humid air like a rusty knife. Your bunk is a wooden plank with a thin mattress that feels like it's stuffed with rocks and regret. The barracks around you smell like 40 men who haven't had a proper bath in weeks because, surprise, hot running water isn't really a thing here. You swing your legs over the side of your bunk and immediately feel the humidity hit you like walking into a sauna fully clothed. It's still dark outside, but the air is already thick enough to chew. Your clothes from yesterday are still damp with sweat, because nothing ever really dries here, nothing. The man in the bunk next to you, Rodriguez, is already pulling on his boots. He's been here 6 months, which makes him practically a veteran. Most guys don't make it past 3 months. Not because they quit, because they die. "Morning, gringo," Rodriguez says, not looking up from his laces. "Sleep good?" "Like a baby," you lie, scratching at the mosquito bites covering your arms. There are at least 20 new ones from last night alone. Each one itches like fire, and some of them are starting to look infected. Rodriguez laughs, a sound with no humor in it. Wait until the real heat starts. This is the cool part of the day. You stumble outside to join the line for breakfast. The mess hall is a long wooden building with screens that don't keep out the flies. Breakfast is coffee that tastes like it was brewed with ditch water, some kind of meat that might be beef if you're optimistic, and beans that have seen better decades. The cook, a weathered man named Murphy, slops your portion onto a tin plate with all the care of someone feeding pigs. "Eat up, boys," he says with a grin that shows more gaps than teeth. "Gonna be a hot one today." You sit down next to a pale, thin man named Jenkins who arrived last week. He's picking at his food like it might bite him back. Which, honestly, it might. "How long you been here?" Jenkins asks, his voice shaky. 2 weeks, you tell him. His eyes widen. 2 weeks? Christ, you're an old-timer. Before you can respond, the whistle blows again. Time to work. You grab your tools from the equipment shed, a pickaxe, a shovel, and a wheelbarrow that's seen better years. The handles are worn smooth by thousands of hands, many of them now 6 feet underground in the local cemetery. The foreman, a thick-set man named O'Malley with a face like a catcher's mitt, addresses the assembled workers. There are maybe 60 of you, representing every corner of the earth. Americans, Irish, Jamaicans, Barbadians, Spanish, French, Chinese, all united by the common goal of not dying today. "Listen up, you miserable sons of bitches," O'Malley shouts, his Irish accent thick as molasses. "We got a quota to meet and the company ain't paying you to stand around looking pretty. Though Lord knows most of you couldn't manage pretty if your lives depended on it." He points to a section of jungle about a quarter-mile away. "That's your new home, boys. Everything green between here and there needs to be gone by sunset. Trees, roots, rocks, snakes, whatever the hell else is hiding in there. I don't care if it's bigger than you are. Make it disappear." You march toward your assigned section, tools in hand, trying not to think about how many men have carried these same tools before you, or where they are now. The jungle is thick, impenetrable, and filled with sounds you can't identify. Birds that sound like they're screaming, insects that buzz like tiny engines. And underneath it all, a constant dripping sound that could be water or could be something much worse. You swing your pickaxe at a thick root, and the impact sends a shock wave up your arms. The root barely shows a scratch. "First time?" asks a voice behind you. You turn to see a massive man with arms like tree trunks. His skin is dark as coffee and scarred from years of manual labor. This is Big Jim, and he's something of a legend around here. Been working the canal for 2 years and still breathing, which makes him practically immortal by local standards. "Is it that obvious?" you ask. Big Jim chuckles, a sound like rolling thunder. "Son, I can spot a greenhorn from a mile away. You're swinging that pickaxe like you're trying to be gentle with it. This ain't a Sunday garden party. You got to mean it." He demonstrates, bringing his pickaxe down on a root, twice the size of yours. The root splits like it was made of paper. "The jungle don't respect politeness," Big Jim continues, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It only respects force. You got to show it who's boss, or it'll swallow you whole." You nod and try again, putting your whole body into the swing. This time the root gives a little progress. The sun is now fully up, and the temperature is climbing fast. By 7 in the morning, it's already in the 80s. By 9, it'll be over 100, and the humidity makes it feel even worse. You're making decent progress on your section when you hear shouting from somewhere deeper in the jungle. It's not the usual work-related cursing. This sounds panicked. "Snake!" someone screams. "Big one!" You drop your tools and run toward the sound along with everyone else. In a small clearing, you find Jenkins backed against a tree, his face white as paper. Coiled in front of him is a snake that's easily 12 feet long and thick as a man's arm. "Nobody move," Big Jim says quietly. "That's a boa. Won't kill you with venom, but it'll squeeze you to death just as quick." The snake's head swivels toward the sound of his voice, tongue flicking out to taste the air. "What do we do?" Jenkins whispers, his voice barely audible. "We wait," Big Jim replies. "It's more scared of us than we are of it." "I seriously doubt that," you mutter. After what feels like an hour, but is probably only a few minutes, the snake decides it has better things to do and slithers away into the underbrush. Jenkins slides down the tree trunk, his legs giving out from under him. "First snake?" Rodriguez asks. Jenkins nods, still too shaken to speak. "Won't be your last," Rodriguez says with a shrug. "Yesterday I found a tarantula in my boot, size of a dinner plate." You make a mental note to check your boots more carefully from now on. Back to work. The sun is getting higher and the heat is becoming unbearable. You're sweating through your clothes faster than you can drink water, and the water tastes like it came from a puddle, which it probably did. By 10 o'clock, 3 men have already collapsed from heat exhaustion. They're carried off on stretchers, and you wonder if you'll see them again. Probably not. The work is backbreaking. Every tree has to be cut down, every root dug up, every rock moved. And for every yard of progress you make, it feels like the jungle grows back 2 yards behind you. You're hacking at a particularly stubborn stump when you notice something moving in the dirt. At first, you think it's just a worm, but as you look closer, you realize it's much worse. "Hookworm," says a voice next to you. It's the camp doctor, a thin man named Patterson who looks like he hasn't slept in months. "Don't touch it with your bare hands." "What does it do?" you ask, though you're not sure you want to know. "Gets into your bloodstream through your skin," Patterson explains. "Makes you weak, anemic, eventually kills you if you don't treat it. And we don't have much in the way of treatment." You stare at the writhing creature in the dirt and realize you've been walking through this stuff for weeks, in boots that have holes in them. "How do you know if you have it?" you ask. Patterson gives you a look that's part sympathy, part resignation. You don't. Not until it's too late. Lunch is called at noon, though the term lunch is generous. It's the same questionable meat and beans from breakfast, served with water that tastes like it was filtered through a dirty sock. You sit in whatever shade you can find, but even the shade is swelteringly hot. The sun is directly overhead now, and the metal tools are too hot to touch without gloves, which of course you don't have. Jenkins is looking worse than before. His skin is pale and clammy, and he keeps shivering despite the heat. You ask him. Just tired, he says, but his voice is weak. Big Jim leans over and takes a look at him. That ain't tired, son. That's fever. Jenkins shakes his head. I'm fine. Just need some water. But when he tries to stand up, he immediately sits back down again. Hard. Doc? Big Jim calls out. We got another one. Patterson hurries over and takes one look at Jenkins. Malaria, he says without hesitation. Get him to the hospital tent. 2 men carry Jenkins away. You watch him go and wonder if that'll be you tomorrow. Don't think about it too much, Rodriguez says, noticing your expression. Drive you crazy if you do. The afternoon shift is worse than the morning. The heat is now so intense that the air shimmers like water. Every breath feels like inhaling steam, and your clothes are soaked through with sweat that never evaporates. You're digging out a massive boulder when you hear a rumble in the distance. Thunder, maybe, or maybe something worse. Landslide! Someone shouts from up the ridge. You look up to see a wall of mud and rocks cascading down the hillside, heading straight for your work area. There's no time to think, only to run. You drop your tools and sprint toward higher ground, along with everyone else in the vicinity. The landslide crashes through the area where you were working seconds before, burying tools, equipment, and unfortunately 2 men who weren't fast enough. When the dust settles, O'Malley is standing on a rock, surveying the damage. Well, boys, he says, his voice matter of fact. Looks like we're starting over. Just like that, 2 men are dead, thousands of dollars worth of equipment is buried, and hours of work are wiped out. And the response is to start over. This is the reality of building the Panama Canal. Death is just another workplace hazard, like splinters or sore muscles. The rest of the afternoon is spent digging out the landslide area and recovering what equipment you can. The 2 bodies are pulled out and added to the growing pile of casualties. Their names will be recorded in a ledger somewhere, and their families back home will eventually receive a telegram informing them of their loss. By 5 o'clock, you're ready to collapse. Your hands are blistered, your back is screaming, and you're pretty sure you've lost about 10 pounds in sweat. But the whistle hasn't blown yet, which means there's still work to do. You're loading rocks into your wheelbarrow when you notice something wrong with the water you've been drinking all day. It's brown. Not just brown, but brown with chunks in it. Is this water supposed to look like this? You ask Big Jim. He glances at your canteen and shrugs. That's what we got. Water's water. But it's brown. So's coffee. You don't see me complaining about coffee. You stare at the water in your canteen and realize you have a choice. Drink the brown water with chunks in it, or die of dehydration. It's not really a choice at all. The water tastes exactly like it looks, like mud with a hint of something organic and unpleasant. You try not to think about what that something might be. Finally, at 6 o'clock, the whistle blows. End of shift. You drag yourself back to the equipment shed to return your tools, then stumble toward the barracks. Dinner is the same as lunch, which was the same as breakfast. You're beginning to suspect that the camp kitchen has exactly one recipe, and it's not a good one. You sit down next to Rodriguez, who's picking at his food with the enthusiasm of someone attending his own funeral. How was your first full day? He asks. Still breathing, you reply. That's something, I guess. After dinner, you have a few hours of free time before lights out. Some men play cards, others write letters home, and a few just stare at the wall with the 1,000-yard stare of men who've seen too much. You decide to visit the camp hospital, partly to check on Jenkins and partly because you're worried about those hookworms. The hospital is a large tent with about 30 beds, all of them occupied. The smell hits you as soon as you walk in. It's a combination of disinfectant, sweat, vomit, and something else you can't identify but don't want to. You find Jenkins in a bed near the back. He's unconscious, his skin yellow and covered in sweat. His breathing is shallow and labored. "He's not good," Patterson says, appearing beside you. "Malaria hit him hard. Might not make it through the night. Is there anything you can do?" Patterson shakes his head. "We got quinine, but not enough. And even if we did, it's not always effective. Sometimes you just got to hope their body can fight it off." You look around the tent at the other patients. Yellow fever, malaria, dysentery, heat stroke, infected wounds, snake bites, spider bites, and things you can't even begin to identify. This is just one day's worth of casualties. "How many people die here every day?" you ask. Patterson pauses, considering his answer. "On a good day? 5 or 6. On a bad day? More." You do the math in your head. If 5 or 6 people die every day, that's over 2,000 deaths per year. And that's just at this one camp. There are dozens of camps along the Canal route. "Why do people keep coming?" you ask. Patterson gives you a tired smile. "Same reason you're here. Money. This job pays better than anything else available, assuming you live long enough to collect your pay." You leave the hospital tent feeling worse than when you went in. The evening air is still hot and humid, but at least it's fresher than the air inside the tent. Back at the barracks, you try to get some sleep, but it's difficult. The heat is oppressive, the mosquitoes are relentless, and every sound outside makes you wonder if it's another landslide, another snake, or something worse. You finally drift off sometime after midnight, only to be woken again at 4:30 by the steam whistle. Day 2. Breakfast is the same mysterious meat and beans, served by Murphy with his gap-toothed grin. "Sleep well, boys?" he asks, as if he doesn't already know the answer. You grab your tools and head out to your assigned section. Yesterday's landslide area has been cleared, more or less, and you're back to hacking at roots and moving rocks. The work is just as backbreaking as yesterday, but somehow it feels worse, maybe because you know what's coming. The heat, the exhaustion, the constant threat of death from a dozen different sources. You're making progress on a large tree stump when you hear a commotion from the direction of the main excavation site. Shouting, the sound of running feet, and then an explosion that rattles the ground under your feet. "Dynamite accident," someone yells. You run toward the sound along with everyone else. In the main excavation area, there's a crater where a work crew used to be. The smell of smoke and something much worse fills the air. O'Malley is already there, surveying the damage with the same matter-of-fact expression he used for the landslide. "Looks like Thompson got a little eager with the fuse timing," he says to no one in particular. Thompson and his crew are scattered around the crater in pieces. Literally. You turn away before you see too much, but it's too late. The image is burned into your memory forever. "Back to work, boys," O'Malley announces. "We'll clean this up later." And that's it. 6 men are dead, blown to pieces by their own dynamite, and the response is to get back to work. No moment of silence, no investigation, no pause to consider whether maybe the safety protocols need to be reviewed. Just back to work. You return to your stump, but your hands are shaking so badly you can barely hold your tools. This could happen to anyone, at any time. One wrong move, one miscalculation, one moment of bad luck, and you're scattered across 50 yards of jungle floor. By noon, the heat is so intense that several men have already collapsed. The water situation is getting worse too. The brown chunks in your canteen have multiplied, and now there's a greenish tint to it as well. You're contemplating whether it's safer to drink the water or risk dehydration when you hear someone calling your name. It's Rodriguez, and he's waving you over to his section. "You got to see this," he says, his voice excited despite the heat. You follow him to a small clearing where he's been working. In the center of the clearing is a hole about 6 feet deep and 3 feet wide. It looks like it was dug recently, but not by any of the work crews. "What is it?" you ask. "Grave," Rodriguez says. "French grave, from the last time they tried to build this canal." You peer into the hole and see bones, human bones. A lot of them. How many people do you think are down there? You ask. Rodriguez shrugs. 10, maybe 15. Hard to tell. They're all mixed together. You stare at the bones and realize these are the remains of men just like you. Men who came here looking for work, looking for a better life, and found only death in the Panamanian jungle. What are we supposed to do with it? You ask. Fill it back up, I guess. Pretend we never saw it. But even after you've covered the grave with dirt and gone back to work, you can't stop thinking about those bones. How long had those men lasted? Days? Weeks? And how long before you joined them? The afternoon brings a new horror. You're working near the edge of the excavation when you hear a man screaming. Not the usual work-related cursing, but genuine, terrified screaming. You run toward the sound and find a worker named Peters thrashing around on the ground, his legs covered in what looks like moving dirt. But it's not dirt, it's ants. Thousands of them, army ants, and they're eating him alive. Big Jim appears with a bucket of water and starts pouring it on Peters, trying to wash off the ants. But there are too many of them, and they're biting with a fury that's almost personal. "Get him to the river," Big Jim shouts. 4 men grab Peters and carry him toward the nearby stream, his legs still covered in ants. They dump him in the water, and the ants finally let go, but the damage is done. Peters' legs are covered in hundreds of bite marks, and he's lost consciousness from the pain. "Army ants," Big Jim explains as they carry Peters toward the hospital tent. "They can strip a man to the bone in minutes if you let them." You stare at the spot where Peters was attacked. The ground is still crawling with ants. Thousands of them, looking for their next victim. "How do you avoid them?" you ask. "You don't," Big Jim says. "You just hope they find someone else first." The rest of the afternoon passes without major incident, if you don't count the heat stroke, the snake bite, and the man who fell into a pit and broke his leg. Just another typical day in paradise. Evening brings little relief from the heat. You're sitting outside the barracks, trying to catch whatever breeze might exist, when Dr. Patterson approaches you. "I need to check you for parasites," he says, holding up a magnifying glass and a small knife. "Parasites? Hookworm, mostly. It's endemic here. Everyone gets it eventually." He has you remove your boots and socks, then examines your feet and legs with the magnifying glass. After a few minutes, he frowns. "You got them," he says matter-of-factly. "How bad?" "Hard to say. Could be nothing, could kill you. We'll know in a few weeks." He gives you a small vial of pills. "Take one of these every day. Might help, might not. We're not really sure." You stare at the pills in your hand. They're your only hope against an infestation that could kill you, and the doctor isn't even sure they work. "What happens if they don't work?" you ask. Patterson shrugs. "You get weak, then weaker, then you die. Sometimes it takes months, sometimes weeks. Depends on how many you got and how strong your constitution is." That night, sleep is even more elusive than usual. Every itch, every pain, every sensation could be the parasites eating you from the inside out. You lie awake listening to the sounds of the jungle and wondering if you'll live to see another week. Day 3 brings news that Jenkins died during the night. Malaria took him in less than 48 hours. His body is already being prepared for burial in the camp cemetery, which is growing larger every day. You attend the brief service, along with about 20 other men. There's no preacher, no elaborate ceremony, just O'Malley reading Jenkins' name from a piece of paper and saying a few words about how he was a good worker. The cemetery is full of wooden crosses with names and dates. Most of the dates are within the last year. Some men lasted months, some lasted weeks, and some lasted only days. You notice one cross that catches your attention. The name is weathered and hard to read, but the date is clear. Died July 15, 1905. That's tomorrow's date. You stare at the cross, wondering if it's a mistake or some kind of omen. In a place where death comes this regularly, maybe they prepare the crosses in advance. Back to work. Your assignment today is to help with the railroad tracks that will carry away the dirt and rock from the excavation. The work involves laying heavy steel rails in the blazing sun, with no shade and no relief from the heat. The rails are so hot you can't touch them with bare hands, but you don't have gloves. You have to wrap your hands in cloth, which works for about 10 minutes before the cloth burns through. You're struggling with a particularly heavy rail when you notice something moving in the dirt beside the tracks. At first you think it's another snake, but as it gets closer, you realize it's much worse. It's a crocodile. Not a huge one, maybe 6 feet long, but still big enough to take off a hand or foot without much effort. "Crocodile!" you shout, dropping the rail and backing away. The other workers scatter, except for Big Jim, who picks up a sledgehammer and approaches the reptile calmly. "Easy, big fella," he says in a soothing voice. "Nobody wants any trouble here." The crocodile eyes him warily, then apparently decides that Big Jim isn't worth the effort. It turns and waddles back toward the water, leaving everyone breathing a little easier. "That happen often?" you ask. "More often than you'd think," Big Jim says. "Crocodiles, snakes, jaguars, you name it. Jungle's full of things that want to eat you." You spend the rest of the morning looking over your shoulder, expecting to see another crocodile, or maybe something worse. The jungle is full of sounds you can't identify, movements you can't explain, and shadows that might be anything. By noon, 2 more men have collapsed from heat exhaustion. The temperature is well over 100 degrees, and the humidity makes it feel like you're breathing through a wet towel. You're taking a break in whatever shade you can find when Rodriguez approaches you with a concerned expression. "You seen Murphy today?" he asks. You think about it. "No, not since breakfast." "Nobody has. He didn't show up for lunch duty. A search party is organized, and you volunteer to help. Murphy could be anywhere in the hundreds of acres of jungle around the camp, assuming he's still alive. You're assigned to search the area near the river, along with 3 other men. The jungle is thick and difficult to navigate, full of vines and roots that catch your feet and branches that whip at your face. After about an hour of searching, you hear one of the other men calling out, "Over here, found him." You push through the undergrowth toward the voice and find Murphy at the bottom of a ravine, about 20 feet down. He's unconscious and his leg is bent at an unnatural angle. "He's alive," one of the men calls down. "Barely." It takes the better part of the afternoon to get Murphy out of the ravine and back to camp. By the time you reach the hospital tent, he's regained consciousness and is moaning in pain. "Doctor." Patterson takes one look at his leg and shakes his head. "Broken in 3 places. I can set it, but he'll never walk right again. And that's assuming infection doesn't kill him first." You help carry Murphy into the tent and get him settled on one of the beds. As you're leaving, he grabs your arm with surprising strength. "Don't stay here," he whispers, his voice barely audible. "Get out while you still can." You want to ask him what he means, but Dr. Patterson is already shooing you out of the tent. The evening meal is prepared by Murphy's assistant, a nervous young man who clearly has no idea what he's doing. The food is even worse than usual, if that's possible. The meat is burned on the outside and raw on the inside, and the beans are so salty they're almost inedible. "Think Murphy's going to make it?" Rodriguez asks, poking at his food suspiciously. "Maybe," you say, though you don't really believe it. Dr. Patterson seems to know what he's doing. Rodriguez snorts. "Patterson's good at 2 things, telling you you're going to die and telling you when you're already dead. Everything else is just guessing." After dinner, you decide to take a walk around the camp, partly to stretch your legs and partly because the barracks are too hot to bear. The sun is setting, but the temperature is still in the 90s, and the humidity hasn't dropped at all. You're walking past the equipment shed when you hear voices inside. You recognize O'Malley's Irish accent, but the other voice is unfamiliar. "Company doesn't care how many of them die," the unfamiliar voice is saying, "as long as the work gets done on schedule." "What about the safety protocols?" O'Malley asks. "What safety protocols? These men are expendable. There's always more where they came from." You edge closer to the shed, trying to hear more clearly. "Look, O'Malley," the voice continues. "You've been here long enough to know how this works. The company pays us to dig a canal, not to coddle a bunch of workers. If they can't handle the work, they shouldn't have signed up. Some of these men have families, O'Malley says, but his voice lacks conviction. Then they should have thought about that before they came here. This isn't a charity. This is business. You back away from the shed, your heart pounding. The conversation confirms what you've already suspected. To the company, you're not a person. You're just a tool, and when a tool breaks, you throw it away and get a new one. That night, you lie awake, thinking about Murphy's warning. Get out while you still can. But how? You're in the middle of the jungle, hundreds of miles from civilization, with no money and no way to get home. You're trapped here, just like everyone else. The only way out is in a pine box. Day 4 begins with the news that 2 more men died during the night. One from yellow fever, one from an infected wound that turned septic. Their bodies are added to the growing pile awaiting burial. The cemetery is running out of space. There's talk of starting a second cemetery on the other side of camp, but nobody wants to take the time away from the main work to dig more graves. Your assignment today is to help with the dynamite work. You've never worked with explosives before, but apparently that doesn't matter. They need bodies, and you have a body. The dynamite crew is led by a man named Kowalski, a Polish immigrant with hands that shake like leaves in the wind. He's been working with explosives for 6 months, which makes him an expert by local standards. Rule number 1, Kowalski tells you as he hands you a stick of dynamite. Don't drop it. What's rule number 2, you ask? Don't let anyone else drop it either. He shows you how to set the charges, how to measure the fuse length, and how to get to safety before the explosion. It's a simple process, but there are about 100 ways it can go wrong, and most of them end with you being scattered across the landscape. How many accidents have there been, you ask? Kowalski's hands shake a little more. Too many. But don't think about it. Thinking makes you nervous, and nervous people make mistakes. You spend the morning placing charges in strategic locations around a large rock formation. The work is nerve-wracking, but it's also kind of fascinating. There's something almost artistic about placing the explosives in just the right spots to bring down the rock efficiently. When it's time to light the fuses, everyone retreats to what Kowalski assures you is a safe distance. You're not entirely convinced, but you don't have much choice in the matter. Fire in the hole, Kowalski shouts, and lights the first fuse. The explosion, when it comes, is louder than anything you've ever heard. The ground shakes, dirt and rocks rain down from the sky, and for a moment you're convinced the world is ending. When the dust settles, the rock formation is gone, replaced by a pile of manageable chunks. It's actually kind of impressive, assuming you don't think too hard about what would happen if you were standing in the wrong place. Not bad for a beginner, Kowalski says, his hand still shaking. You might live through this after all. The afternoon brings a new challenge. A tropical storm is brewing, and the wind is picking up. The palm trees are swaying violently, and the air has that electric feeling that comes before a big storm. Should we stop work? You ask O'Malley. He looks at the darkening sky and shakes his head. Company says we work unless there's lightning. No lightning, no break. But 20 minutes later, the lightning starts. Not just a few flashes, but constant, brilliant bolts that light up the sky like a strobe light. The thunder is so loud it drowns out all other sound. And then the rain starts. It's not regular rain. It's like someone opened a fire hose in the sky and pointed it straight down. Within minutes, you're soaked to the skin, and the ground turns into a river of mud. Now, can we stop? You shout over the thunder. O'Malley looks around at the chaos, water streaming down his face. I think we can call it a day. Everyone runs for the barracks, but by the time you get there, you're so wet you might as well have jumped in the river. Your clothes are plastered to your body, your boots are full of water, and you're shivering despite the heat. The storm lasts for hours. The rain hammers on the roof of the barracks like machine gun fire, and the wind howls through the gaps in the walls. Several times, you're convinced the whole building is going to blow away. When the storm finally passes, the damage is extensive. Several tents have been destroyed, part of the dock has been washed away, and there are trees down everywhere. It's going to take days to clean up the mess. But more importantly, The storm has turned the worksite into a swamp. The ground is so saturated with water that every step sinks you ankle-deep in mud. The excavation areas are filled with standing water, and the railroad tracks are buried under a foot of muck. "Well, boys," O'Malley says as he surveys the damage, "looks like we got our work cut out for us." Day 5 is spent trying to pump water out of the excavation areas and clearing mud from the railroad tracks. It's back-breaking work, and the pumps keep breaking down because they're clogged with debris. You're operating one of the pumps when it suddenly starts making a grinding noise and stops working. You look inside and find it's clogged with something that looks like a dead fish, but you're not entirely sure. The smell suggests it might be something worse. "Another pump down," you call out to O'Malley. He trudges over through the ankle-deep mud, his face grim. "That's the third one today. At this rate, we'll spend more time fixing pumps than using them." You spend the rest of the morning trying to clean out the pump mechanism, but it's like trying to perform surgery with a sledgehammer. The parts are corroded, the filters are clogged beyond repair, and you're pretty sure some of the components have simply dissolved. By noon, the sun has come out again, and the humidity is now approaching levels that make you question whether you're still breathing air or if you've somehow transitioned to breathing soup. Your clothes, which were soaked from the storm, are now steaming in the heat. You're taking a break in whatever shade you can find when Rodriguez approaches you with bad news written all over his face. "Peters is dead," he says quietly. "The ant guy?" "Yeah. Infection got him. Doctor says the ant bites got infected, then the infection spread to his blood." You think about Peters thrashing on the ground, covered in army ants, and realize that could be any of you. One wrong step, one moment of bad luck, and you're ant food. "How long did it take?" you ask. 3 days from the bite to the grave. Doctor says he probably didn't suffer much at the end." Rodriguez pauses. "Course, the doctor says that about everyone." The afternoon brings a visit from the company inspector, a well-dressed man in a clean white suit who looks like he's never done a day of manual labor in his life. His name is Pemberton, and he's here to evaluate the progress of the work. He walks around the site with a clipboard, making notes and asking questions that demonstrate a complete lack of understanding about the realities of the work. "Why is the progress so slow?" he asks O'Malley, stepping carefully around a puddle of mud. "Well, sir," O'Malley says, his Irish accent thick with barely controlled sarcasm, "we've had some setbacks. The landslide, the dynamite accident, the storm, the yellow fever outbreak, the malaria, the dysentery, the heat stroke, the snake bites, the crocodile attacks, and the general fact that we're trying to dig a canal through a jungle that's actively trying to kill us." Pemberton makes a note on his clipboard. "I see. And what steps are being taken to address these issues?" O'Malley stares at him for a long moment. "We're burying the dead and replacing them with new workers." "That seems inefficient," Pemberton observes. "So does dying," O'Malley replies. Pemberton continues his inspection, oblivious to the fact that everyone is staring at him with expressions ranging from disbelief to homicidal rage. He complains about the condition of the equipment, the cleanliness of the work site, and the attitude of the workers. "These men don't seem very motivated," he tells O'Malley. "Hard to stay motivated when you're dying of tropical diseases," O'Malley replies. "Perhaps some incentive program would help. A bonus for meeting quotas, or a penalty for falling behind." You exchange glances with Rodriguez. A penalty for falling behind, as if dying wasn't penalty enough. Pemberton spends about an hour at the site, then climbs back into his clean carriage and heads back to whatever air-conditioned office he came from. You watch him go and realize that to him, you're not even human, you're just numbers on a spreadsheet. The rest of the afternoon is spent in a kind of rage-fueled productivity. Everyone is working harder than usual. Not because they're motivated by Pemberton's visit, but because they're furious about it. You attack your assigned section of jungle with a vengeance, hacking at roots and moving rocks with the kind of intensity that comes from having nowhere else to direct your anger. By evening, you've made more progress than you have in the previous 3 days combined. But the anger fades, replaced by exhaustion and the growing realization that no amount of hard work will get you out of this alive. The jungle will kill you, or the diseases will kill you, or the accidents will kill you, but something will definitely kill you. Evening brings another tropical storm, this one even worse than the last. The wind is strong enough to knock you off your feet, and the rain comes down in sheets so thick you can't see more than a few feet in any direction. You're huddled in the barracks with the other men, listening to the storm tear apart everything outside. The building creaks and groans with every gust of wind, and you're starting to wonder if it's going to hold together. "Anybody know how to swim?" asks a voice in the darkness. "Why?" someone else responds. "Because if this keeps up, we're going to need to." The water is already starting to seep under the doors and through cracks in the walls. Within an hour, there's an inch of standing water on the floor of the barracks. "Should we evacuate?" you ask. "To where?" Rodriguez replies. "Everywhere else is just as flooded." So you sit in the rising water and hope the storm passes before you drown in your sleep. Day 6 begins with the discovery that half the camp has been washed away. The mess hall is gone, the equipment shed is gone, and several of the smaller buildings have simply vanished. The main excavation site is now a lake. Breakfast is whatever canned goods survived the flood, eaten cold because the kitchen is underwater. You sit on a pile of equipment, sharing a can of beans with Rodriguez, and trying not to think about how much worse things can get. "Think they'll shut down the project?" Rodriguez asks. "Not a chance," you reply. "Too much money invested. They'll just bring in more equipment and more workers. More workers to replace the ones who died. More workers to replace the ones who died." You spend the morning helping to pump water out of the excavation site, but it's like trying to empty the ocean with a teacup. For every gallon you pump out, 2 more flow in from somewhere else. By noon, it's clear that the pumping effort is futile. The site is going to remain flooded until the water has time to drain naturally, which could take weeks. "New plan," O'Malley announces. "We're moving to higher ground. There's a section about 2 miles north that didn't flood. We'll start fresh there." So you pack up what equipment survived the storm and march 2 miles through jungle that's now even thicker and more hostile than before. The flood has stirred up all kinds of creatures that were previously hiding in the underbrush. You encounter 3 different types of snakes on the march, 2 of which are definitely venomous. There's also a family of wild pigs that seems very unhappy about being displaced by the flood, and something large that crashes through the undergrowth but never shows itself. The new work site is on a hillside overlooking the flooded excavation. It's higher ground, which means it's less likely to flood again, but it also means the work is going to be even harder. Digging uphill is exponentially more difficult than digging on level ground. You're assigned to a crew that's tasked with clearing a section of particularly thick jungle. The trees here are massive, some of them easily 100 feet tall and 10 feet in diameter. Taking them down is going to require dynamite, which means working with Kowalski again. "You're getting good at this," Kowalski tells you as you help him place charges around the base of a giant tree. "Most beginners are dead by now." "Thanks, I think." "No, really. You got instincts for this work. When to be careful and when to take risks. That's rare. You're not sure if that's a compliment or an insult, but you'll take it." The explosion brings down the tree, but it also brings down 3 other trees that were connected to it by vines. The resulting crash can be heard for miles, and when the dust settles, there's a pile of timber that's going to take days to clear. "Well," Kowalski says, his hands shaking more than usual, "that was bigger than I expected." The afternoon is spent cutting up the fallen trees and hauling the pieces away. It's exhausting work, made worse by the fact that the wood is still green and incredibly heavy. You're dragging a section of tree trunk when you hear shouting from the direction of the main work site. It's not the usual work-related shouting. This sounds like panic. You drop the trunk and run toward the sound, along with everyone else in the area. What you find when you get there makes your blood run cold. There's been another landslide, but this one is different. Instead of just mud and rocks, this slide has uncovered something that was buried in the hillside, something that shouldn't be there. It's a mass grave. Not a small one like the French grave Rodriguez found, but a massive pit filled with hundreds of bodies in various stages of decay. Some are just bones, others still have flesh clinging to them. Jesus Christ, someone whispers. Dr. Patterson is already on the scene, examining the bodies with professional detachment. French workers from the first Canal attempt, he says. Looks like they died of yellow fever and were buried in a hurry. The smell is indescribable. It's the smell of death multiplied by hundreds, made worse by the humidity and heat. Several men immediately start vomiting, and you're fighting hard not to join them. What do we do with them? O'Malley asks. Patterson shrugs. Cover them back up, I suppose. Nothing else we can do. But covering them up means working right next to the mass grave, breathing in the smell of decay, and trying not to look at the faces of the dead. Some of them still have expressions of pain and terror. You're shoveling dirt over the bodies when you notice something that makes you stop cold. One of the skulls has your name carved into the forehead. Not a similar name, but your exact name, spelled correctly. You stare at the skull for a long moment, wondering if you're hallucinating from the heat and stress. But the name is definitely there, carved deep into the bone. Rodriguez, you call out, your voice shaky. He comes over and looks where you're pointing. His face goes pale. That's impossible, he says. I know. Unless what? Unless this is some kind of warning. Maybe this place is cursed or something. You don't believe in curses, but you also can't explain why your name is carved into a skull that's been buried for 20 years. You quickly shovel dirt over the skull and try to forget about it, but the image is burned into your memory. Your name, carved in bone, in a mass grave in the middle of the Panema jungle. The rest of the afternoon passes in a kind of numb shock. You go through the motions of work, but your mind keeps returning to that skull. What did it mean? Was it some kind of coincidence? Or was it something more sinister? Evening brings no relief from the heat or the humidity. If anything, it seems to be getting worse. The air is so thick you can barely breathe, and your clothes are constantly soaked with sweat. You're sitting outside the barracks trying to catch whatever breeze might exist, when Big Jim approaches you with a concerned expression. You okay? He asks. You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have, you reply, and tell him about the skull. Big Jim listens without interruption, his expression growing more serious as you talk. I've seen strange things in my time here, he says when you finish. Things that can't be explained by science or reason. This place, it's got a darkness to it. The land itself is angry about what we're doing to it. You think the place is cursed. I think there's more ways to die here than anybody wants to admit, and some of those ways don't make sense in the regular world. That night, sleep is impossible. Every sound outside could be the jungle coming to claim you. Every sensation could be the beginning of some tropical disease. And every time you close your eyes, you see that skull with your name carved into it. Day 7 begins with the news that Murphy died during the night. The infection from his broken leg spread to his blood, and there wasn't anything Dr. Patterson could do to stop it. Murphy's last words, according to the doctor, were, "Tell them to get out while they still can." You think about Murphy's warning from a few days ago, and wonder if he knew something the rest of you don't. Maybe he'd seen his own skull with his name carved into it. Your assignment today is to help with the railroad construction. The tracks that were buried in the flood need to be dug out and repaired, which means working in mud that's knee-deep and filled with things you don't want to identify. You're digging around a buried rail when your shovel hits something hard. You clear away the mud and find a human skull staring up at you. This one doesn't have your name carved into it, but it's still a shock. Another body, you call out to O'Malley. He trudges over through the mud and takes a look. French? He asks. Probably. Looks old. Cover it up and keep working. We don't have time to excavate every body we find. So you shovel mud back over the skull and continue working. Just another dead body, in a place where dead bodies are as common as mosquitoes. By noon, you found 6 more skulls and part of a rib cage. The entire railroad bed seems to be built on top of a cemetery. How many people died building the first canal? You ask Rodriguez. Thousands, he replies. Maybe tens of thousands. Nobody kept accurate records. And they just buried them wherever? Where else were they going to bury them? This whole place is a graveyard. The thought that you're walking on the bones of dead workers is deeply unsettling. Every step could be crushing someone's skull. Every shovel full of dirt could contain human remains. The afternoon brings yet another accident. A section of scaffolding collapses, taking 3 men with it. One is killed instantly, crushed under a beam that weighs several tons. The other 2 are badly injured but still breathing. Dr. Patterson works on them in the hospital tent while you and the other men stand around helplessly. There's nothing you can do but wait and hope they survive. One of them, a young man named Kelly, keeps asking for his mother. He's probably no more than 18 years old, and he's dying in a jungle on the other side of the world from everything he's ever known. Is he going to make it? You ask Patterson. The doctor shakes his head. Internal bleeding. I can't stop it with what I have here. Kelly dies an hour later, still calling for his mother. The other injured man, Wilson, survives but loses his left arm. Patterson has to amputate it with a rusty saw and no anesthetic except a bottle of whiskey. You hold Wilson down while Patterson works, and his screams will haunt your dreams for the rest of your life, which, given the circumstances, might not be very long. That evening, there's a brief ceremony for the men who died. It's becoming a daily ritual, these little funerals. O'Malley reads their names from his ledger, says a few words about them being good workers, and then they're added to the cemetery. The cemetery now has over 200 graves, and it's only been operating for 8 months. At this rate, there will be more dead workers than living ones by the end of the year. You're walking back from the cemetery when you encounter Dr. Patterson. He looks exhausted, like a man who's seen too much death and suffering. How do you do it? You ask him. Do what? Deal with all the death, all the suffering. Patterson stops walking and looks at you with eyes that have seen things no human should have to see. You get used to it, he says quietly. That's the terrible thing. You get used to it. Day 8 brings news that's somehow even worse than usual. There's been an outbreak of yellow fever in the camp, and it's spreading fast. Yellow fever is different from malaria or dysentery. Those diseases kill you slowly, giving you time to suffer and regret your life choices. Yellow fever kills you quickly, but it's not a merciful death. First, you get a high fever and chills. Then your skin turns yellow, hence the name. Then you start bleeding from your eyes and mouth. And then you die, usually within a week of the first symptoms. Dr. Patterson has quarantined the affected men in a separate tent, but in a place where hundreds of people live in close quarters, quarantine is mostly theoretical. How many cases? You ask him. 12 confirmed, maybe 20 more showing early symptoms. What's the survival rate? For yellow fever? About 10% if they're lucky. You do the math in your head. If 30 men have yellow fever, that means 27 of them are going to die in the next week. The work continues despite the outbreak, because the company's schedule doesn't allow for pandemic delays. You're assigned to a crew that's digging drainage ditches to prevent future flooding. The work is miserable. You're digging in mud that's contaminated with runoff from the hospital tent, which means you're essentially swimming in diseased water. Every cut, every scrape, every open wound is a potential entry point for yellow fever. By noon, 2 more men have developed symptoms. By evening, it's 5 more. The disease is spreading through the camp like wildfire, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. You're lying in your bunk that night, listening to the sounds of men dying in the hospital tent, when you feel a chill run down your spine. Not a metaphorical chill, but an actual, physical chill, despite the oppressive heat. You check your temperature by feeling your forehead. It's very hot. You try to convince yourself it's just the normal heat and humidity, but deep down you know the truth. You're getting sick. Day 9 begins with you trying to hide your symptoms from Dr. Patterson. If he finds out you have yellow fever, you'll be quarantined in the death tent with the other victims. But hiding yellow fever symptoms is like trying to hide a house fire. The fever makes you weak and disoriented. The chills make you shake uncontrollably, and the nausea makes it impossible to keep food down. You make it through breakfast, though you can't eat anything. You make it to the work site, though you can barely lift your tools. But by 10 o'clock, you're too weak to stand. You look terrible, Rodriguez says, helping you sit down on a log. I'm fine. You lie. No, you're not. You're burning up. Before you can protest, Rodriguez is calling for Dr. Patterson. The doctor takes one look at you and shakes his head. Yellow fever, he says matter-of-factly. Sorry. They carry you to the quarantine tent on a stretcher, and you get your first look at what yellow fever really does to people. The tent is full of men in various stages of dying, and the smell is a combination of vomit, blood, and something sweet and rotten. Some of the men are unconscious, others are delirious, and a few are still lucid enough to understand what's happening to them. The lucid ones are the worst to listen to, because they know they're dying and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Dr. Patterson gives you a bed near the back of the tent and hands you a bottle of water. Drink as much as you can, he tells you. Try to keep your fever down. Other than that, there's not much I can do. What are my chances, you ask? Patterson pauses, considering his answer. You're young and strong. That helps. But yellow fever doesn't care how young or strong you are. It kills whoever it wants to kill. The first day in the quarantine tent is a nightmare of fever dreams and hallucinations. You see things that aren't there, hear voices that don't exist, and feel like your body is burning from the inside out. The man in the bed next to you, a French worker named Dubois, keeps talking to people who aren't there. He's having entire conversations with his dead wife, his dead children, and his dead parents. They're waiting for me, he tells you during a brief moment of lucidity. On the other side, they say it's peaceful there. Dubois dies that night, talking to his dead family right up to the end. Day 10 is worse. The fever is higher, the chills are more violent, and you're starting to see the yellow tinge in your skin that gives the disease its name. You're also starting to bleed. Not a lot, just a little from your nose and gums, but it's the beginning of the hemorrhaging phase. The phase that usually means death is coming soon. Dr. Patterson checks on you regularly, but there's nothing he can do except make you as comfortable as possible. Yellow fever has to run its course, and either you survive it or you don't. How long? You ask him during one of his visits. Usually 7 to 10 days from the onset of symptoms. You're on day 3, so you have maybe a week left to live. A week to lie in this tent full of dying men, listening to their final words and watching them slip away one by one. That night, you dream about the skull with your name carved into it. In the dream, you're digging your own grave while the skull watches and laughs. When you wake up, you're not sure if it was a dream or a hallucination. Day 11 brings a brief improvement. Your fever breaks for a few hours, and you're able to eat some broth without vomiting it back up immediately. That's a good sign, Dr. Patterson tells you. Sometimes the fever breaks just before the end, but sometimes it means you're going to make it. Which one is this? Too early to tell. The improvement doesn't last long. By evening, the fever is back with a vengeance, and the bleeding is getting worse. You're coughing up blood now, and your vision is starting to blur. The man in the bed across from you, an American named Thompson, dies during the night. He goes quietly, just stopping breathing sometime between midnight and dawn. In the morning, they carry his body out and bring in a new patient to take his place. The turnover in the tent is constant. Men come in sick and leave dead, replaced by new victims almost immediately. It's like a conveyor belt of death. Day 12 is when you realize you're probably going to die. The bleeding is getting worse, your vision is failing, and you're too weak to sit up without help. Dr. Patterson doesn't say anything, but you can see it in his eyes. He's seen this progression too many times before. He knows what comes next. You spend the day writing a letter to your family, though you doubt they'll ever receive it. The Panama Canal Company isn't known for its attention to the families of dead workers. Tell my family I tried to come home, you write with a shaking hand. Tell them I thought about them every day. That night, you dream about home. About your family, your friends, the life you left behind to come to this green hell. In the dream, you're sitting around the dinner table with everyone you love, and they're all asking why you left them. You try to explain about the money, about the opportunity, about wanting to build something important, but in the dream they can't hear you. You're already dead. Day 13 is when the miracle happens. You wake up and the fever is gone, really gone, not just temporarily broken. Your vision is clear, the bleeding has stopped, and for the first time in days, you feel human again. Dr. Patterson can't believe it. I've seen men come back from the brink before, he tells you, but not often. You're lucky. Or, unlucky, you reply. Now I have to go back to work. Patterson laughs, but there's no humor in it. Yes, now you get to risk dying from something else. You spend another day in the quarantine tent to make sure the fever doesn't come back. Then you're released back to general population. Walking out of that tent feels like being reborn. The camp has changed while you were sick. There are fewer men, more graves, and a general air of desperation that wasn't there before. The yellow fever outbreak killed 37 people in 2 weeks. Rodriguez greets you like you've returned from the dead, which in a way, you have. Thought you were gone for sure, he tells you. Most people don't come back from that tent walking. Most people aren't as stubborn as I am. Your first day back at work is a struggle. The yellow fever left you weak and shaky, and even simple tasks are exhausting. But it feels good to be doing something other than lying in a bed waiting to die. You're assigned to help with the ongoing drainage work, which means more digging in contaminated mud. The irony isn't lost on you that having survived yellow fever, you're now back to doing the exact work that probably gave it to you in the first place. The other workers treat you with a mixture of respect and superstition. Surviving yellow fever is rare enough that some of them think you're either blessed or cursed. Maybe you got some kind of immunity now, Big Jim suggests. Maybe you can't get it again. Or maybe I just used up all my luck, you reply. That evening there's another visit from Inspector Pemberton, the man in the white suit who seems to exist in a different reality from the rest of you. This time he's concerned about the productivity slowdown caused by the yellow fever outbreak. I understand there's been some illness, he tells O'Malley, but the work schedule can't be adjusted for every minor setback. O'Malley's voice is dangerously quiet. We lost 37 men in 2 weeks. Yes, that's unfortunate. But there are always more workers available. The important thing is maintaining our progress toward the completion deadline. You watch this exchange from a distance, marveling at Pemberton's complete disconnection from reality. To him, 37 dead men are just a minor inconvenience, like bad weather or a delayed shipment of supplies. What would you suggest we do about future outbreaks? O'Malley asks. Perhaps better hygiene among the workers, and maybe some kind of incentive program to encourage them not to get sick. The silence that follows this suggestion is deafening. Every worker within earshot is staring at Pemberton with expressions that range from disbelief to murderous rage. An incentive program, O'Malley repeats slowly, to encourage workers not to get yellow fever. Exactly. Perhaps a small bonus for workers who remain healthy, or a penalty for those who require medical attention. At this point, several workers start walking toward Pemberton with expressions that suggest they're about to provide him with some very direct feedback about his suggestion. O'Malley quickly intervenes. I think that's enough inspection for today, he tells Pemberton. Your carriage is waiting. Pemberton climbs into his clean carriage and disappears into the jungle, oblivious to how close he came to being torn apart by angry workers. Incentive program, Rodriguez mutters. I got an incentive for him. The weeks that follow blur together in a haze of heat, humidity, disease, and death. You survive 2 more malaria outbreaks, a dysentery epidemic, 3 landslides, and countless smaller accidents. The work progresses, slowly and at enormous human cost. Every foot of canal dug requires gallons of blood and dozens of lives. The jungle fights back against every shovel of dirt moved, every tree cut down, every rock blasted away. You learn to sleep through the sounds of men dying. You learn to eat food that would have made you sick back home. You learn to work in heat that should kill you, with diseases that should kill you, around dangers that should definitely kill you. Most importantly, you learn not to think too much about tomorrow, because tomorrow might not come. The cemetery now has over 400 graves. O'Malley's ledger is filled with names of men who came here looking for work and found only death. Some lasted months, some lasted weeks, and some lasted only days. The French graves you found earlier are no longer unique. The whole region is becoming one giant cemetery, with work sites scattered among the burial grounds. You're working near one of the French grave sites when you make a discovery that changes everything. While digging out a stubborn root, your shovel hits something metal. You clear away the dirt and find a brass plaque, green with age but still readable. Here lies the Panama Canal, it reads, abandoned due to the impossibility of completion. Too many have died for too little progress. May God forgive us for what we have attempted. You stare at the plaque for a long moment, realizing what it means. The French didn't just abandon the canal because of yellow fever or financial problems. They abandoned it because they realized it couldn't be built, not without killing everyone who tried. Rodriguez, you call out. You need to see this. He comes over and reads the plaque, his face growing pale. They knew, he says quietly. The French knew it was impossible, and they tried to warn people. And we're doing it anyway. That night, you lie awake thinking about the plaque and what it means. How many more men will die before the American effort is abandoned like the French effort? How many more graves will be dug before someone admits that the cost is too high? You think about Murphy's warning, get out while you still can. Maybe Murphy had seen the plaque, or others like it. Maybe he knew something the rest of you were just figuring out. The canal project is not just difficult or dangerous. It's impossible. The jungle, the diseases, the climate, the terrain, everything about this place is designed to kill human beings. And no amount of American ingenuity or determination is going to change that. You wake up the next morning with a decision made. You're going to leave. Somehow, some way, you're going to get out of this green hell before it kills you like it's killed so many others. The question is how? You're hundreds of miles from civilization, with no money and no transportation. The company doesn't allow workers to leave before their contracts are up, and breaking a contract means forfeiting all pay. But staying means almost certain death, and leaving means possible survival. It's not really a choice at all. You spend the day working and planning. There are supply boats that come up the river every few weeks, bringing food and equipment to the work sites. If you could stow away on one of those boats, you might be able to make it back to civilization. The risk is enormous. If you're caught, you'll be sent back to work with no pay and possibly face criminal charges. If you're not caught but the boat sinks or you're discovered during the journey, you could end up dying anyway. But the alternative is staying here and definitely dying, so the choice is clear. That evening, you approach Rodriguez with your plan. You're crazy, he tells you. They'll catch you before you get within 100 yards of the dock. Maybe. But I'd rather die trying to escape than die digging this stupid canal. Rodriguez is quiet for a long moment, considering your words. You know what, he finally says. I think you're right. This place is going to kill all of us eventually. Maybe it's better to die trying to leave than die trying to stay. You want to come with me? Yeah, I do. Over the next few days, you and Rodriguez quietly recruit a few other men who are ready to risk everything for a chance at survival. Big Jim agrees to come, as does Kowalski, the explosive expert whose hands shake more every day. This place is making me crazy, Kowalski admits. I see dynamite everywhere, even when I'm sleeping. If I stay much longer, I'm going to blow myself up just to end the misery. The 5 of you make plans for your escape. The next supply boat is due in 3 days, and it usually stays at the dock for about 6 hours while they unload cargo. That's your window. The plan is simple. Hide in the jungle near the dock, wait for the boat to finish unloading, then sneak aboard while the crew is distracted. Once the boat starts moving, reveal yourselves and hope the captain is more interested in getting paid for extra passengers than in turning you over to the authorities. It's not a great plan, but it's the only plan you have. On the night before the escape attempt, you lie awake thinking about all the men who won't be leaving with you, all the men who are already dead, and all the men who will die after you're gone. You think about Jenkins, who died of malaria on his second day, about Peters, who was eaten alive by army ants, about Murphy, who fell into a ravine and died of infection, about Thompson and his crew, who were blown to pieces by their own dynamite. You think about the hundreds of graves in the cemetery and the thousands more that will be dug before this project is finally abandoned. Most of all, you think about that skull with your name carved into it. You never did figure out what that meant, but maybe it doesn't matter anymore. Maybe it was just the jungle's way of telling you that you don't belong here. The morning of the escape dawns hot and humid, just like every other morning in this green hell. You go through the motions of normal work, trying not to let anyone suspect what you're planning. At lunchtime, you and the other four slip away from the work site and make your way through the jungle toward the dock. The supply boat arrived on schedule, and you can hear the crew unloading cargo. You hide in the thick undergrowth about 50 yards from the dock, watching and waiting for your opportunity. The crew works quickly and efficiently, clearly eager to finish their business and get away from this place. You don't blame them. After about 5 hours, the unloading is finished, and the crew starts preparing to leave. This is your chance. The 5 of you sprint from your hiding place toward the boat, running as fast as you can across the open ground of the dock. For a moment, it looks like you're going to make it undetected. Then someone shouts, "Stowaways!" and everything goes wrong. The boat crew starts shouting, dock workers come running from all directions, and O'Malley appears from nowhere with a look of fury on his face. "Going somewhere, boys?" he asks, his Irish accent thick with sarcasm. You and your companions are surrounded before you can reach the boat. There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and no way to talk your way out of this. "Back to work," O'Malley commands. "All of you. And you can forget about any pay for the next month. Consider it a penalty for attempted desertion." As you march back to the work site under guard, you catch a glimpse of the supply boat pulling away from the dock. Your chance at escape disappears into the jungle, and with it, probably your only hope of survival. "Should have moved faster," Rodriguez mutters. "Should have waited for a better opportunity," you reply. "Should have never come to this god-forsaken place," Big Jim adds. That night, you're confined to the barracks under guard. O'Malley makes it clear that any further escape attempts will result in much harsher punishment, possibly including imprisonment. "This isn't a vacation resort," he tells you. "You signed contracts, and you'll honor those contracts. The only way you're leaving here is in a pine box, or when your time is up. And at the rate you're going, it's probably going to be the pine box." The failed escape attempt seems to break something in all of you. The small hope you'd been carrying, the tiny flame of optimism that maybe you could survive this, is extinguished. You go back to work the next day like broken men, going through the motions without any real purpose. The jungle seems more hostile than before, the heat more oppressive, the diseases more virulent. Within a week of the failed escape, Kowalski is dead. Not from an explosion, as everyone expected, but from dysentery. He dies in the hospital tent, calling out for his mother in Polish while his body wastes away. Big Jim lasts 2 more weeks before malaria takes him down. He fights it longer than most men, his massive frame giving him reserves of strength that smaller men don't have. But even Big Jim can't fight microscopic parasites forever. He dies on a Tuesday morning, just as the sun is coming up. His last words are, "Tell my family I tried to come home." Rodriguez makes it another month before a snake bite kills him. Not one of the big snakes like the boa that scared Jenkins, but a small, brightly coloured one that he accidentally steps on while working. The venom acts fast. Within an hour, he's unconscious. Within 6 hours, he's dead. Dr. Patterson shakes his head as he pulls a sheet over Rodriguez's face. "Coral snake," he explains. "Nothing I could have done. The venom is too potent. You're now the only survivor of the escape attempt, and you're not sure if that makes you lucky or cursed. The work continues, because the work always continues. More men arrive to replace the dead, fresh-faced workers, who haven't yet learned that coming here was the worst mistake of their lives. You try to warn some of them, but they don't listen. They're here for the money, just like you were. They think they're different, stronger, luckier than the men who came before them. They're wrong, of course. The jungle doesn't care how strong or lucky you think you are. It kills everyone eventually. You watch the new arrivals make the same mistakes you made, ignore the same warnings you ignored, and slowly realize that this cycle will continue forever. New men will come, old men will die, and the canal will advance one bloody foot at a time. By your 6th month in Panama, you're one of the senior workers, not because you've been promoted, but because almost everyone who arrived before you is dead. O'Malley treats you with something approaching respect now, not because he likes you, but because experienced workers are rare and valuable commodities. You've got good instincts, he tells you one day. Most men don't last this long. Most men are smarter than I am, you reply. Maybe. Or maybe you're just too stubborn to die. You're working on a section of particularly difficult excavation when you make another disturbing discovery. Your shovel hits something hard, and when you clear away the dirt, you find another brass plaque. This one is newer than the French plaque, and the inscription is in English. American Canal Attempt 1. Abandoned October, 1904. Death toll, 3. 847 men. Project deemed impossible. You stare at the plaque in shock. This isn't the first American attempt to build the canal. This is the second attempt. The first one was abandoned less than a year ago, after killing nearly 4,000 men. And here you are, part of the second American attempt, which is clearly going no better than the first. You show the plaque to O'Malley, expecting him to be shocked or surprised. Instead, he just nods grimly. I wondered when someone would find that, he says. You knew? I was here for the first attempt. Barely survived it myself. And you came back? O'Malley's laugh has no humor in it. Where else was I going to go? This is the only work I know how to do. But you know it's impossible. We're all going to die here. Maybe. Probably. But the company keeps paying and I keep working. It's all any of us can do. That night, you lie awake thinking about the second plaque and what it means. You're not just part of a dangerous construction project. You're part of a repeating pattern of failure and death that stretches back years. How many more attempts will there be? How many more thousands of men will die before someone finally admits that the Panama Canal can't be built? The answer, you realize, is as many as it takes. The company will keep trying, and men will keep dying, until either the canal is finished or the company runs out of money. And since the company seems to have unlimited money, that means unlimited death. You start to understand why Murphy warned you to get out while you still can. He'd probably seen the plaque, maybe both plaques. He knew what this place really was. Not a construction site, but a machine for converting human lives into corporate profits. The months that follow are a blur of heat, disease, and death. You survive a cholera outbreak that kills 60 men in 2 weeks. You survive a landslide that buries an entire work crew. You survive a jaguar attack that leaves you with scars you'll carry for the rest of your life. Every survival feels less like victory and more like cruel irony. You're not living, you're just dying slowly. The cemetery now has over 800 graves. The original cemetery has been expanded 3 times, and there's talk of starting a 4th section. At this rate, the cemetery will be larger than the canal. Your 1-year anniversary in Panama passes without ceremony. You're now officially a veteran worker, which means you've managed to avoid death longer than 90% of the men who've come here. It doesn't feel like an achievement. By your 15th month, you're one of only 12 men who were part of the original crew you arrived with, 12 out of more than 200. The mathematics of survival are not in your favor. Dr. Patterson, who somehow managed to survive longer than almost anyone, keeps detailed records of the death toll. According to his calculations, the average worker lasts 4 months and 2 weeks. You're way ahead of the curve, he tells you during one of your regular checkups. Most men would have died twice by now. Lucky me. Luck has nothing to do with it. You're careful, you're smart, and you're stubborn. That's a good combination for staying alive in this place. But even Patterson's scientific approach to survival can't explain why some men live and others die. He's seen strong men die in their first week, and weak men survive for over a year. There's no pattern, no logic to it. Sometimes I think the jungle just picks people at random, he admits. It's playing some kind of game with us. The work itself has become routine. If work that involves constant mortal danger can ever be routine. You know which snakes to avoid, which water to drink, which symptoms mean you're probably going to die. You've learned to sleep through explosions, to work through fever, and to keep going even when every instinct tells you to lie down and give up. Most importantly, you've learned not to get attached to the new workers. They're going to die anyway, so there's no point in learning their names or their stories. This emotional numbness is probably what's keeping you sane, but it's also turning you into something less than human. You're becoming like O'Malley, treating death as just another workplace hazard. By your 18th month, you've been promoted to crew chief, not because of any particular skill or leadership ability, but because all the previous crew chiefs are dead. Your job now is to train new workers and try to keep them alive long enough to be useful. It's like teaching children to walk in a minefield. Listen carefully. You tell each new group of arrivals, because what I'm about to tell you might save your life. This place will kill you in more ways than you can imagine. Your only chance of survival is to be scared, be careful, and be lucky. Some of them listen. Most of them don't. They're young and strong and confident, just like you were when you arrived. They think they're different. They're not different. They die just as quickly and just as horribly as everyone else. You watch them make the same mistakes you made, ignore the same warnings you ignored, and slowly realize that you're trapped in an endless cycle. New workers arrive, you train them, they die, new workers arrive to replace them. It's like being stuck in a nightmare that repeats forever. By your second anniversary in Panama, you're one of the longest surviving workers in the entire project. This is not an honor you wanted, but it's the only distinction you have. The canal has advanced maybe 2 miles in the 2 years you've been here. 2 miles of progress bought with over 2,000 lives. At this rate, it will take 50 years and 100,000 dead workers to finish the project. If it can be finished at all. You're working on a section near the original French excavation when you find the third plaque. This one is older than the others, and the inscription is in Spanish. Spanish Canal attempt. 1,698. 1,701. Abandoned due to impossible conditions. May God have mercy on our souls. 3 attempts. The Spanish tried to build a canal here over 200 years ago and failed. The French tried and failed. The first American attempt failed. And now you're part of the second American attempt, which is also clearly failing. How many more attempts will there be? How many more centuries of death and failure before humanity finally admits that some things can't be done? You show the Spanish plaque to O'Malley, who examines it with the weary expression of a man who's seen too much. 400 years, he says quietly. 400 years of men trying to dig a ditch through this jungle, and the jungle winning every time. Why do we keep trying? Because we're human. We don't know when to quit. That night, you have the same dream you've been having for months. You're digging your own grave while the skull with your name carved into it watches and laughs. But this time, when you look into the grave, you see not just your own body, but the bodies of every man who's ever tried to build this canal. Spanish conquistadors, French engineers, American workers, all piled together in a mass grave that stretches from ocean to ocean. And standing at the edge of the grave, watching them all, is the jungle itself, patient and eternal and victorious. You wake up in a cold sweat, despite the oppressive heat. Your 30th month in Panama brings news that changes everything. A company representative arrives with an announcement that the second American canal attempt is being suspended indefinitely. Due to unforeseen challenges, and higher than anticipated costs, he reads from a prepared statement. The Panama Canal Company has decided to temporarily halt construction while we reassess our approach. Temporarily, as if they're planning to come back someday and try again. The surviving workers, all 43 of you out of the thousands who've come here over the past 3 years, are offered transportation back to the United States. Your contracts are void, your pay is forfeit, but you're free to leave. After 30 months of hell, 30 months of watching men die every day, 30 months of slowly going insane in the green death trap that is Panama, you're finally free to leave. The boat that will take you home arrives 3 days later. It's the same type of supply boat you tried to stow away on 2 years ago, but this time you're an invited passenger. As you board the boat with the other survivors, you take one last look at the work site. The excavation looks tiny compared to the vast jungle around it, like a small scar on the face of something enormous and indestructible. The cemetery, on the other hand, looks huge. Hundreds of wooden crosses stretch as far as you can see, marking the graves of men who came here with dreams and ambitions and found only death. Your cross is not among them, which makes you either very lucky or very unlucky, depending on how you look at it. The boat pulls away from the dock, and Panama disappears into the jungle behind you. You're sailing away from the worst experience of your life, but you're also leaving behind a part of yourself that will never recover. You survived the Panama Canal, but the Panama Canal didn't survive you. It killed something inside you, some essential part of what made you human. The other survivors don't talk much during the journey home. What is there to say? You all went through the same hell, saw the same horrors, lost the same friends. Words seem inadequate. Dr. Patterson sits next to you on the deck, staring out at the water with the 1,000-yard stare of a man who's seen too much death. You know they'll try again, he says quietly. The canal? Somebody will. Maybe not this company, maybe not this decade, but somebody will try again. They always do. Maybe they'll learn from our mistakes. Patterson laughs, but there's no humor in it. They never learn. That's the thing about human nature. We keep making the same mistakes over and over again, expecting different results. The journey home takes 2 weeks. 2 weeks of slowly readjusting to the idea that you might actually survive this experience. But even as the distance between you and Panama grows, you can't shake the feeling that you're not really escaping. The jungle, the diseases, the constant threat of death, they're all still with you, living in your nightmares and your memories. You left Panama, but Panama didn't leave you. When you finally reach New York Harbor and see the Statue of Liberty rising from the water, you should feel relief, or joy, or gratitude. Instead, you feel nothing. The capacity for normal human emotions seems to have been burned out of you somewhere in the Panamanian jungle. You disembark with the other survivors and immediately go your separate ways. There are no reunions planned, no promises to keep in touch. You've shared an experience that none of you want to remember, and staying together would only make forgetting harder. You find a cheap boarding house and spend the first week just lying in bed, marveling at simple luxuries like clean sheets, fresh air, and the absence of mosquitoes. It's like being reborn into a world where death isn't constantly lurking around every corner. But the nightmares continue. Every night, you're back in Panama, digging ditches in the blazing sun, watching friends die of tropical diseases, running from snakes and crocodiles and army ants. You wake up sweating and shaking, expecting to see the wooden walls of the barracks and instead seeing the painted walls of a New York boarding house. You try to find work, but explaining your 2.5 years in Panama is difficult. Most employers have heard stories about the Canal project, and none of those stories end well. Panama Canal, eh? Says one potential employer, a factory foreman with skeptical eyes. Heard that was a disaster. Lot of men died down there. Yes, sir. A lot of men died. You don't look like you're dying. Not yet. He doesn't hire you. Eventually you find work in a steel mill, doing dangerous labor for low pay. It's hot, dirty, and occasionally deadly, but compared to Panama, it feels like a vacation. No tropical diseases, no venomous snakes, no landslides. just the normal, manageable dangers of industrial work. Your co-workers think you're crazy because you never complain about the working conditions. The heat doesn't bother you, the long hours don't tire you, and the risk of industrial accidents seems trivial compared to what you've survived. You're either the toughest son of a bitch I've ever met, one of them tells you, or you're completely insane. Maybe both, you reply. Years pass. You work, you save money, you try to build some kind of normal life. But normal is relative when you've seen what you've seen, survived what you've survived. You read in the newspapers that another company is planning to attempt the Panama Canal. This time, they claim, they have better technology, better planning, better understanding of the challenges involved. You could write them a letter explaining why they're wrong, why the canal is impossible, why they're sending men to their deaths for no reason. But you don't. They wouldn't listen anyway. They never do. Instead, you save the newspaper clipping and put it in a box with the other mementos from your time in Panama. Your work contract, your medical records from Dr. Patterson, a photograph of the original work crew that shows 200 men, most of whom are now dead. Sometimes, late at night when the nightmares are particularly bad, you take out the box and look through the mementos. Not because you want to remember, but because you're afraid of forgetting. All those men who died in Panama deserve to be remembered, even if it's only by someone who barely survived the same experience. Jenkins and Rodriguez and Big Jim and Kowalski and Murphy and all the rest. They came to Panama with hopes and dreams and ended up as wooden crosses in an overgrown cemetery. You're the witness to their stories, the keeper of their memories. And as long as you're alive, they're not completely forgotten. 10 years after you left Panama, you read that yet another company is attempting to build the canal. This one claims to have solved all the problems that defeated the previous attempts. Better equipment, better medicine, better engineering. The newspaper article includes an interview with the project manager, a confident man who dismisses the previous failures as the result of poor planning and primitive technology. This time will be different, he promises. We've learned from the mistakes of the past. You fold the newspaper and put it away. They haven't learned anything. They never do. 15 years later, you read that the latest canal attempt has been abandoned after killing over 3,000 workers. The article mentions yellow fever, malaria, landslides, and impossible working conditions, the same problems that killed your friends, that nearly killed you. But the article also mentions that yet another company is already planning a new attempt. They think they can succeed where everyone else has failed. You're 63 years old now, and the Panama Canal has been killing men for your entire adult life. Different companies, different technologies, different approaches, but always the same result. Failure and death, and more failure. Maybe Dr. Patterson was right. Maybe it's just human nature to keep making the same mistakes over and over again, expecting different results. On your 70th birthday, you read in the newspaper that someone has finally succeeded in building the Panama Canal. Not the original canal you tried to dig, but a different route with different technology and massive government backing instead of private funding. The article mentions that over 25,000 workers died during the successful construction, and that doesn't count all the workers who died in the previous failed attempts. Your friends were just a small part of a much larger tragedy that stretched across decades. But they built it. After centuries of failure and death, they actually built the canal. You're not sure how to feel about that. Part of you is glad that all that death finally accomplished something. Part of you is angry that it took so long and cost so much. And part of you wonders if it was worth it. 25,000 dead workers. Was connecting two oceans worth 25,000 human lives? You suppose that depends on who you ask. You die peacefully in your sleep at the age of 78, one of the few men who worked on the Panama Canal and lived to tell about it. Your landlord finds your body the next morning, along with a box of mementos from your time in Panama. The landlord throws most of it away, but he keeps the photograph of the original work crew, 200 young men in work clothes, standing in front of the Panamanian jungle, smiling confidently at the camera. They had no idea what was waiting for them in that green hell. No idea that most of them would be dead within 6 months. No idea that they were part of a pattern of failure and death that stretched back centuries. But they were young and strong and optimistic, and they believed they could accomplish something impossible. Maybe that's the most human thing of all, the willingness to try, even when the odds are hopeless. The landlord sells the photograph to an antique dealer, who sells it to a collector, who eventually donates it to a museum. It hangs now in a display about the Panama Canal, with a small placard that reads, "American Workers, 1905. 200 names, reduced to a single line of text. But if you look closely at the photograph, you can see the hope in their faces, the confidence in their posture, the belief that they're about to be part of something great and historic. They were right about that, just not in the way they expected. The Panama Canal was eventually built, and it stands today as one of the great engineering achievements of the 20th century. Ships pass through it daily, carrying cargo between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, connecting the world in ways that were once unimaginable. But the canal is also a monument to human stubbornness, to our refusal to accept that some things might be impossible. It's a reminder that we'll keep trying, keep dying, keep failing, until we finally succeed or finally give up. And we almost never give up. So the next time you hear about some impossible project, some crazy scheme to do something that's never been done before, remember the men who tried to dig the Panama Canal in 1905. Remember their confidence, their hope, their determination. And remember that most of them died trying. Because that's what we do. We try impossible things, and most of us fail, and some of us die, but a few of us succeed. And somehow, that's enough to keep the whole species moving forward. Even when the cost is measured in graveyards, even when the price is paid in blood, even when the jungle always wins in the end, except when it doesn't.